So this is another video tutorial about debt sizing and debt sculpting when you have multi-tranches of debt with completely different terms. Okay, so let's first go through the assumptions. We have two senior debt tranches. The first one is a Development Bank with 12 years of tenor and 5% interest rate. And they have told you upfront that they want to fund no more than 49% of total senior debt. So basically no crowding out of commercial lenders. The second one is a commercial bank, let's say with an 8-year tenor and 8% interest rate. And the lenders, they agreed on a base case DSCR of 1.3. which basically means that for $1 of every debt service, the project needs to generate $1.3 in cash. And we're going to use that DSCR for our debt sizing and debt sculpting. So we assume that we have already built a model, you have your CFADS, your cash flow available for debt service, which you calculated already period by period. Now, we need to answer 3 questions. First of all, what is the maximum total debt this cash flow can support? And second of all, how much of that goes to the Development Bank versus the commercial bank? And third question, how does each bank's principal get sculpted over time? So let's do this step by step. Step 1, we are aiming to calculate the target debt service. So we start by deriving the target debt service by simply dividing the CFADS by our target DSCR, which is in this case 1.3x. And we, of course, multiply it by our repayment flag, which is just limiting the CFADS over the debt life. So this target debt service is basically our ceiling, meaning that it's the maximum debt service the project can sustain at any given period during the debt repayment. So now here in step 2, that's where things get more interesting. So we have derived our target debt service. Now what we need to look at is that the commercial bank has 8 years tenor, right? And the Development Bank has 12 years tenor. So there are 2 distinct phases. I call the year 1 through year 8 the overlap period. That's where both banks are being repaid simultaneously. And from year 9 to year 12, that's where the tail is. That's where only the Development Bank remains. So the commercial bank has already been fully repaid and we are left only with the commercial tranche. So these 2 phases are important to remember, and of course we need to create a flag for both of these phases. So the main question and the main complexity is during the overlap, right? How do you split the target debt service between the 2 banks during the overlap period, or in this case during the first 8 years of the project? Okay, let's call that share sweep percentage. It might not be a very good name because you might confuse it with the cash sweep mechanism, but let's keep it there as a sweep percentage. So whenever I refer to sweep percentage, what I mean in this video is the percentage of the target debt service that goes to the Development Bank tranche. So during the overlap period, the Development Bank received a sweep percentage of target debt service and the commercial bank will get the residual. And during the tail, 100% of the target debt service is available for the repayment of the development bank. So now if we go through that, so we basically have these two equations. So we know that the development bank debt service is equal to the target debt service during the overlap times the sweep percentage plus the 100% of target debt service during tail. And the commercial bank debt service is equal to the target debt service during overlap times 1 minus our sweep percentage. Now, if we use the same logic, we can basically size both of these tranches using the formulas, meaning that we need to discount the target debt service to get to the debt sizing of both tranches. So the development bank maximum commitment will be equal to the present value of its share of the overlap debt service, of course discounted at its own rate or 5% in this case, plus the present value of the entire tail, again discounted at its interest rate, which is 5%. And for the commercial bank, the sizing of the commercial bank will be equal to the present value of its share of the cash of the target debt service during the overlap, discounted at its own interest rate, commercial bank interest rate, which is in this case 10%. So we're going to keep all these equations in mind, and we're going to just do some naming to facilitate the calculation of this sweep percentage for us. So we're going to call the sizing of the development bank the dev bank, and the size of the commercial bank, we're going to call it com bank. We're going to define a new variable called A. That A is the present value of the target debt service during overlap, discounted at the development bank interest rate. B is going to be the PV of the target debt service during tail, discounted at the development rate. And C is going to be the PV of the target debt service during overlap at commercial bank interest rate. And the W is going to be the development bank share of total debts. So that's the constraint that the development bank has put for their debt sizing to not exceed 49% of total debt. So we're basically going to use that constraint to calculate that sweep percentage. So we're going to substitute the A and B and C to these definitions that we have up there. And we're going to get the development bank is going to be equal to A times sweep percentage plus B. Commercial bank is going to be C times 1 minus sweep percentage. So that 49% that the lenders, the development bank put as a limit for the sizing of their tranche is basically the 49%, or W, is equal to the development bank divided by the total debt, which is the sum of dev bank plus commercial bank. So we're going to substitute these two definitions into this formula for the share of development bank as a percentage of total debt, and we're going to solve for the sweep percentage. So we're going to cross multiply, we're going to bring the cash sweep to the one side of the equation, and we're going to factor out the sweep percentage to the left. And then eventually we're going to get to the formula for the calculation of this sweep percentage. So now let's come back to our Excel file. We have seen how to derive this formula for the sweep percentage or share of the development bank in the target debt service during the overlap. So in our Excel file, we basically set up all the different flags and counters that we need to calculate these sweep percentage. We take the CFADS during the repayments. We take the target DSCR, which is provided by lenders, and we get to our target debt service. And we use the different A and B and C components of the formula, which are the present value of the cash flow at different interest rate, to calculate our sweep percentage. So in this case, if we plug in this formula, which is just the weighted average of the present value of the target debt service, we get a share of 23% for the development tranche. So 23% of the target debt service will go to the repayment of the development tranche, and the remaining will be devoted to the payment of the commercial tranche during the overlap period. So once we have our percentage, now the rest is going to be easy. We can calculate now the maximum commitment from the Development Bank tranche. We don't have the total yet, right? So this approach, we first separately calculate the sizing of tranche 1 and tranche 2, and then we add them up to get the total debts. So this is simply going to be that share, 23% that we calculated, multiplied by the PV of debt service during the overlap at discounted at the Development Bank interest rate, because we are sizing the Development Bank tranche here, plus 100% of the debt service discounted at the Development Bank interest rate. So that's going to give you the Development Bank maximum commitment. For the commercial bank, it's just simply 1 minus 23% times the PV of the debt service during the overlap discounted at the commercial bank interest rate. So the sum of these two is going to give you the total debts in this case, which is 605. Then you have, you can simply now, so you have already sized the debt. For the sculpting, it's again easy. You already have the total debt service for the Development Bank, which is simply the target debt service during the overlap multiplied by 23% plus 100% of the target debt service during the tail. So that's the target debt service for the commercial bank. And then you also have a target debt service for the, the other one was, maybe I said the other way around. The previous one was Development Bank. Now for the commercial bank, it's just going to be 1 minus 23%. That cash sweep or the sweep percentage that we calculated multiplied by the target debt service, which is calculated based on the 1.3 target debt service. Okay, so up to now we are fine. Now the big test is to make sure that the ending balance of both tranches at the end of the debt life is equal to 0, meaning that we fully repay both tranches of debt, which is the case here. And we can also put different checks in the model to make sure that the DSCR basically is equal or greater than the minimum DSCR imposed by lenders, which our case is the case because we sized the debt based on 1.3 and we sculpted as well based on 1.3. So this is the case. We make sure that the ending balance of both tranches are equal to 0, which is the case here. And we make sure that the split between the Development Bank and the commercial bank is 49-51, which is the case here. And the other check is that we make sure that the Development Bank tranche repayment is not negative, which can happen in cases where you have an indexed price or tariff, or you have like seasonalities where when you sculpt it, you will see that it might give a negative repayment for the development tranche. And, there are ways to remedy that I'm not going to cover here. So the reason why I brought up this approach is that it makes us think a little bit more deeply about this problem of debt sizing and debt sculpting before we just, set up our goal seek or copy and paste or bisectional, whatever, to enforce the model to size the debt and repay, both tranches fully. Of course, just a disclaimer, I would still prefer the LLCR approach, which is the methodology that I learned from Professor Edward Bodmer, because it's easier when it comes to more than 2 tranches of debt. With that percentage sweep methodology, the math with 3 and more tranches might become a little bit more complicated. However, the LLCR approach is also another elegant way to do the same. It requires some also copy and paste because there are some circular references in the process. But I already covered it in other blog posts and videos, and Professor Bodmer also has a lot of materials about it on his website. But if you're interested in these topics and you want to look at these issues, make sure you comment or contact me and we will see what we can do. So that's about it, and see you in the next video.